Hey, get in, fellas. We're going back to therapy. Today is Wednesday, March 26th, and the NCAA tournament is going on over my shoulder. I hope all your brackets are doing well. Today, we are stoked to end the neurodiversity block, and we have on our most comical guest, stand up comedian, disability advocate, and a woman who was diagnosed with Tourette's at a young age, a pretty severe case, Pamela Rae Schuller. The interview is so good, so funny. We ran long. We're not even doing a topic. We're just going to dive right into the interview because we didn't want to cut anything. And it was all valuable and a ton of fun. Check her out at pamelacomedy.com. Plug at the beginning. We'll plug it at the end too. We're stoked to wrap up the neurodiversity block this week when we're talking about Tourette syndrome, but I want to make sure we thank everybody who made this block what it was, which was a lesson in empathy, teaching us how to understand the perspective and experience of others. And I can tell you, I learned a lot from our guests, and I hope you guys all did too. So thanks again to Dr. Matt Zakreski. You can find the Neurodiversity Playbook wherever you get your books. My boys, Chef Max Wertheim, Dr. Kylie House, Scott and Aaron from Autism Society of Colorado, my dear friend AJ Shapiro, and today's guest again, Pamela Rae Schuller. We will wrap up by inducting United States men's national team legend goalie Tim Howard, who himself was diagnosed with Tourette's and obsessive compulsive disorder at a young age, showing us that you can be a physical athlete when also not always having control over your body. How impressive for him. And also just a heads up, while we remain open to feedback, we are going to be doing a revamp of the show, which means we're going to take a little spring break to work on that, okay? So we will see y'all on the back end of a 2-week break because everybody needs some time off, and that'll be April 16th. We'll be happy to come back and share our new style with y'all. But for now, as we always do, let's go. Pamela, do you have a preferred vocal exercise to warm us up for the interview today? Maybe from choir days or acting days?
I have zero musical talent, so there was never choir days. No, but I can tell you, like, I dance around before any show and I say, I'm going to make people laugh. I'm going to make people cry.
We're going to make people laugh. I like it. So we're getting warmed up. All right, audience, bros, and others who listen to our show, we are thrilled to have on Pamela Rae Schuller today. She is a professional stand-up comedian. She is an advocate for mental health for children across the country, and she is a professional speaker, speaking to audiences of young age, teenagers, businesses as a motivational speaker. And we are super lucky to have her today in the neurodiversity block because Pam has lived her life with Tourette syndrome, and a really unique and probably misunderstood condition that I know she's going to help us really understand a lot today and also help us laugh a lot. Pam, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, as I was preparing for this interview, Pam, I was watching. So Pam has been fortunate enough. She's been all over the place. You can find her at pamelacomedy.com. And she has appeared also on a Netflix dating show called Netflix Jewish Matchmaking. I watched her clip, and my first thought was, okay, the guest is going to be funnier than I am. I got work to do. So big stakes, stand-up comedian, Pam.
But not on a Wednesday at 11 a.m. So you're good.
Pam, thank you so much. So we've started these interviews in the neurodiversity block much the same way, which is in your language, plain language, not doctor language. How would you describe Tourette syndrome to somebody who doesn't know much?
Yeah, I would say, well, it's a difference between how I tell you if I've been drinking and sober and really trying to help you learn. I would say it's a neurological disorder, and it means that I do movements and noises that I can't control, called tics. But not TICKS, TICS. Those are very different. And that everyone with Tourette's is so incredibly different. The media likes you to think it's just yelling bad words. I like to say I do that for fun. In reality, out of most people with Tourette's, out of every 5, only 1 yells words or phrases. It's even additional diagnosis. I did have that when I was a kid. But all of us have uncontrollable and repetitive movements and noises.
Yeah. Okay. And then as we think about the alcohol, does that help the tics or hurt the tics?
Oh, no, it makes it so much worse. But if you ask me about Tourette's when I've had I don't drink much, like a half a drink, and I'm 4'6.5". So a half a drink, I'm pretty much gone. I will tell you it is contagious. It is not. That is a lie. But if I've been drinking, it's funnier that way.
And I'm sure, that's so funny. The American public, and part of what we're trying to do here is educate, is you're going to get people with that joke who initially back up. I'm sure you've gotten some strange responses with that joke. So, thinking about this, Tourette's is generally considered a childhood disorder and a lifelong condition. when were you first aware that like something was up?
So I started doing like professional theater when I was a kid. The director kept asking me if I had something in my eye. I was rolling my eyes. I would like jump and kick my feet to my butt. And my mom was watching an episode of the Maury Povich show
Wow.
on Tourette's, and she was like, oh. And so she went and got me diagnosed. And it was like pretty easy. Even at that age when like Tourette's wasn't really a known thing, it was pretty clear that's what I had.
Okay, how about for maybe our younger part of the audience, Pam? Maury Povich brings back like a Ricky Lake era, a
Yeah.
Montel Williams era. So there are still daytime talk shows. How would you describe Maury Povich show for the people? There's a lot of examples.
It was like if Ellen DeGeneres had a baby with Jerry Springer.
Speaking of Netflix documentaries, did you watch that one on the Jerry Springer show recently? Oh,
Oh,
it's so good. It's in depth. Shout out my parents who usually listen, who Jerry Springer, before he was the mayor of Cincinnati, Pam, where I'm from, played in the JCC softball league with my dad. He showed up in his Maserati or some shit, played right field, was so bad, terrible. But there's tons of pictures of my parents with Jerry, and like, what a legend, a complicated guy. But yeah,
yeah.
Maury Povich makes us think about how our childhoods may have been similar if our moms were both consuming Maury Povich right around the same time. Do you remember, it sounds like you remember that time pretty vividly. Did that make sense? Did it hurt? Was it confusing? How did it feel to now have a name for something?
I think it was all of the above, but it also felt freeing. I think so many people kept trying to train the ticks out of me, right? I had a third grade teacher who had me stand in a corner if I didn't have happy eyes. This was so misunderstood that people really thought with punishment I wouldn't do these things. And suddenly I had a word to describe what I couldn't understand in my body. I'm like, why can't I stop this? And so I think that was freeing. I think the way people talked about it wasn't. Suddenly I was a smart kid. I was in like the accelerated learning program, and suddenly that was off the table because I had a diagnosis that was neurological. I went, to a big public school, elementary school, and then middle school where you really needed to fit into a box. And having a disability that affected my body and the noises that I made, and I was smart, didn't put me in one of the boxes that they wanted me to be in.
Right. Which is so complicated, guys. I really am going to be pushing everybody to Pam's YouTube page and her website. She did a really nice clip on her experience with doctors and some of the funnier experiences she's had. And Pam, you make this good point because what we're trying to emphasize on this segment of our episodes is it can look different for everybody. And so while we might associate autism with developmental delay or ADHD with being a problem in class, that it can look different for everybody. And you're right. I'm picturing the 90s as most of our audience is, went to school in the 90s. Like, what do you remember about how they balanced those forces of like, yes, you had a disability that needed potentially some accommodations, but also like you did not need to be in the special ed class.
Well, they didn't balance it because I was placed in special ed. So I ended up later on, we sued my entire school system because
Wow.
they kept trying to put me back in special education. And I always say, like, for some people that might be a fit. For me, it wasn't. I just felt so isolated and alone. That was the beginning of depression for me when I wasn't being challenged in school. And I also was, being sent the message that my presence took away from the world, that I was disruptive. And because of that, I was something other people had to work through, that, if someone did include me, they were doing a good deed. They didn't really want me there. And I kind of internalized all of that. So it was a tough number of years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine as a young kid, you're, especially in that age in elementary school where your goal is to get good at things, be good master, be good at sports, be a good student, that you're getting this constant feedback of like, hey, shut up. Hey, stop doing the thing you're doing. That inevitably it's going to impact your self-esteem, as you alluded to.
And it wasn't even be good at something. Like I remember being in an IEP meeting and they let me attend the meeting, which was great, even though they didn't totally do it correctly once I was there. And I remember a teacher saying, what do you want to be in 10 years? And now looking back, this is such a sad answer, but I was being a snarky asshole. I said 10 years older. And I was being snarky, but there was truth to that. I don't think I thought about what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was like out of college, because it just constantly felt like I was holding on to, there wasn't room to dream.
And it's making me think a little bit too, if we're thinking forward a few years into your teenage years, like having a disorder that's so encompassing, it may have, or I would imagine, kind of defined your sense of self, who you were.
It was yeah. And not only that, the media again goes back to like Tourette's being noises and barking. And I did that and I did yell the words. But for me, it was also a lot of chronic pain. Threw my head back so hard I broke my own neck as a kid. Tensed my stomach muscle so hard I ruptured my own appendix. Public school kicked me out. There was a number of years where I just didn't go to school. I ended up going to boarding school in Burlington, Vermont. And that's where my story really shifted.
Hmm.
While I still definitely struggled, a little bit through college, boarding school is where I started having some hope. I started realizing maybe I could go to college, that I could even maybe finish high school. Boarding school changed the trajectory. They put me in stand up. They were the
I was
best.
thinking, I wanted to ask next about treatment, and we will, but my question is, so it was Ben and Jerry's ice cream was the treatment? That's what helped?
Treatment. Yeah.
That's
Some
what
Ben
made a
and
big
Jerry's
difference?
ice cream, some fish.
1 pint of fish food, yes, every night would
Fish,
be.
fish the band. It
Oh,
was
I
like,
know, but fish, the band food, right? It's spelled PHI. Yes. Oh, of course. Like, I'm also a Midwestern, Jewish summer camp kid, Pam. I know my
okay.
fish, not to the extent of everybody out here in Colorado. I would not want to, even maybe before you ended up in boarding school, can you remember what was treatment like as a kid? How did that go early on?
Anything that studies show might help Tourette's, I did. So, I was on like cocktails of medication. There were a few years where my mouth hung open. I have almost no memory of those years. I like remember, but it felt like I was watching from a different angle.
Hmm.
I like at one point there was a study that the nicotine patch helped Tourette's. So at 12 years old, I was walking around with a patch. Like I did everything: therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. I had multiple neurologists, neurocognitive biofeedback, cocktails of medications. And there were things that helped and things that for me, I don't think did.
Yeah. What do you think did?
To this day, I love occupational therapy. It's my self care. I love
Yeah.
it. I skip in there so happy. I'm in my 30s. I show up. It's so fun. Also, my occupational therapist sometimes brings her dog, and it just feels good, right? It's just great.
I think OTs, we don't talk a lot about on this show, but occupational therapists have such a good vibe of like, we are going to define the goal as the patient wants it. What is the goal? And that is to function your day to day. And we'll figure out how to get there, which I love about mental health therapy too, Pam, because there's no defined goal. We're just kind of fucking winging it and figuring it out. And so for you, who you had so many people in your life that were trying to cure the problem or shut it down, where maybe you started meeting people who were like, let's learn how to live with this and succeed with this, that it just felt different.
You just nailed the language that, like, I talk a lot about when people ask, how did my mom deal? I say, for so many years, the conversation was curing it and getting rid of it, but it wasn't going anywhere. And so once the conversation shifted to like, you can struggle and love who you are at the same time, like learning more about myself, embracing parts of Tourette's. I can still be honest that sometimes it sucks, but it also, I don't know, Tourette's at this point is the most lucrative thing about me. It gave me a brain that
Yeah.
differently. I am creative and funny and wildly inappropriate, I think in part because my brain is different. And
Yeah.
so, kind of both of those things can be true. But I love therapy at this point. Meds made me gain a ton of weight and made me feel like a zombie. For some people, super helpful.
Yeah, and I know just we talk about the meds on the show a little bit, right? A means to an end to help us engage in therapy, especially when it comes to depression, anxiety, maybe OCD. But with Tourette's, right? Like, you end up on the antipsychotic medicines. I'm sure you had your experience with the Risperidals and maybe the Haldols, and like,
Yeah.
boy, oh fucking boy, for our audience who does not know what those words are, no fun. Zip zilch zero fun types of medicines to be on. So Pam, I hear you there.
Gained 110 pounds in 3 years on those meds.
Wow. Yeah. And not a surprise there. But I really think that's so great to think about, that changing that vibe of living with something, thriving with something, as opposed to pushing it away, because you probably knew better than the doctors. You knew better than the therapists at an early age, which is like, this is not a light switch. Neurodiversity conditions, most mental health conditions are not going to turn off, right? They are going to turn up and down in volume and intensity throughout your life and throughout your stressors. It's hard for me to really imagine what it was like all those years of your life having people try to turn you off.
Yeah.
You must have known early on, like, motherfucker, this isn't going to happen like that. Are you serious?
I don't know that I knew that early on. I wish I did. I think once boarding school, I think again, saved me and helped me figure that out. But early on, I think I believed all of the things. I think
Mm.
I, believed that I was a waste of space. I internalized all of it, which is why I was such an asshole when I got to boarding school. It wasn't all Tourette's. I was like shoving the world away from me, which
Yeah.
resulted in so many great, amazing stories. but at the time wasn't so funny.
Yeah, I mean, even the idea that if doctors are telling you as a young person that like this could get better, light switch off, and then you're not, I'd imagine you were feeling like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
If this is supposed to get better, but it's not, then it must be something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just a shame that it was posed that way for you.
And I fully was shut down. I mean, years later when I was kind of actively doing therapy, because as a kid, when you're depressed, when you don't care, you're not actively participating. You're maybe just showing up. And so when I started actively participating, I used the language that I almost had to move back into my body because
Mm.
I spent so many years hating it. It hurt. I was in pain. I was uncomfortable. It made me embarrassed. It put me in all these bad situations. And I truly had just moved out.
Yeah. Well, you even talked about that and the medications may have contributed to this, Pam, as they can, but observing yourself. I mean, I heard you slip that in there where imagine this, guys. I want everybody to picture this. You don't have control over your body with Tourette's, facial tics, movements of the arms and extremities, right? Vocal tics. How on earth could you feel connected to your body if you have no control over it?
And if you're in constant pain, I mean,
Yeah.
and what you see today, like little twitches, picture it. My Tourette's is still considered severe, but it was so much more aggressive. Like at this point, I might do this as a tick and kind of tense my neck. And I want you to think about like I would snap my head back as hard as my body could. And
Yeah.
I mean, so much so that at one point I broke my ankle as a kid. Awful story about that I share on stage on, someone accidentally nudged me going to the bus. I fell off the sidewalk, broke my ankle in half, but nobody helped. Nobody helped because they all just didn't know how I communicated and my Tourette's was so severe. And so I had this broken ankle and it wasn't healing because I was like pushing it against the cast. And then
Yeah.
mixed with that, my head was throwing back over and over. And I remember my mom, I was going to go for an x-ray of my ankle to see if it had done any better. And my mom said, I think she needs an x-ray on her neck. And this was over the phone. And the doctor said, you can't break a neck from Tourette's. It's just not going to happen. It would have to be like a car accident. And
Right.
then we show up at the office and he watched me tick and he said, we need to do an x-ray of her neck. And sure
Yeah.
enough, it was I had a bone shattering from the top down as I threw my
Right.
head back so hard and so many times. So even though I was in excruciating pain, the ticks didn't stop.
Yeah, it's so funny too, Pam, because I know you've had experiences with physicians, good, bad, and ugly, I'm sure. And I would be in that same camp of like, look, if you're controlling you can't make your neck go that fast. There's no way. And you're like, motherfucker, watch me. And then he's like, oh, wait, I changed my mind there. I actually am gonna unlearn. I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, like, I try to be open to relearning everything that I thought I knew in medicine, especially, let alone in life and about people. And so, for better or for worse, Pam, you've probably taught doctors some things.
I hope
Fucked
so,
up
but
as
I've
that
also
is.
walked out.
Yeah.
Like, the best thing I learned was like, oh, I have agency and free will. And if a doctor is saying something to me that's like wildly inappropriate, I can go.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can just leave.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
fun.
And hey, I do all virtual telepsych now, Pam. So people, they literally can just turn the computer off. It doesn't happen often, but like, I always think that if I'm like, if I'm not doing a good job, wouldn't they just leave? Wouldn't they just turn off? I'm not holding them hostage in the office. They don't really have to do anything besides turn off the computer. So it helps me just be like, all right, we're just going to do this. You seem poised, Pam. And I'm just very interested because, I work with teenagers and anybody in this country can understand how important it is to get kids and teens on the right track when they've struggled. What did this boarding school do? It sounds like you're ready to blow them up in such a positive way. And I just would love to hear like, what did they do that had you be able to feel comfortable?
So many things, but I
Yeah.
think they met me where I was, right?
Yeah.
Like they pushed me, they held me accountable, and they loved on me. They cheered me on. I had the record of the most attention ever earned in the entire history of the boarding school. So they certainly weren't just like, Pam has a disability. We're not going to hold her accountable. My favorite thing they did is that one day in detention, which again, I had the most.
You
So many,
proud?
so proud.
Yeah, I hope. I would think. Yeah.
Like breaking laws. I was funny, and that once they figured that out, they put me in stand up. But I was in detention, and I was the only one there. And the teacher, or the staff member, was like, "Okay, I want you to make a list of what you love about yourself." And I had nothing. And I
Mm.
remember I can like see his face to this day as he realized, like, oh, he thought I would like. They thought I was being just like a snarky asshole, and
Yeah.
suddenly they were like, "Oh shit, like this is bad." And they were the ones that put me in therapy. And then they essentially said I would get detention off for everything I tried to try to figure out something about myself that I loved. And they were the ones that through that journey put me in stand up and improv. And that's been like a forever thing for me. Obviously, that's what I somehow now do. And so that was one thing. And then also, they had me write apology letters to everyone I was an asshole to. And like, this is not Tourette's. This is like Pam being an asshole. I always like to clarify. But these apology letters are stand up. They knew they were funny. And I like when I graduated, they gifted them back to me. And I found them in my mom's basement. And none of them are real apologies, but they're all hilarious. And
Yeah.
I think they like saw these letters. I know for a fact they read them out loud to each other at night. I know I was part of their evening entertainment.
Yeah.
They denied when I was there, but have owned it now. The letter, they realized I was creative. I was a writer. And instead of getting me to change, they leaned in. Like they saved these letters for me as a gift. They knew these were funny,
Yeah.
but they just
Were they like roasts of your teachers, essentially? That's what I'm picturing.
I mean, yes. And sometimes, I mean, I was doing things wrong all the time. So, oh, here's what's to my math tutor, Isaiah, who I adored. Dear Isaiah, I'm sorry I threw my math book against the wall. It was my attempt at trying to throw it into another dimension, so I never had to look at it again. I'm mostly sorry it didn't work. Love, Pam. Like hundreds of those where I was like, I'm so sorry you're wrong. I'm so sorry you're an idiot.
You know, it's funny because I was just going to ask, like, do you think you were an asshole or do you think you were depressed? Because oftentimes, right, like the irritability from depression and self-esteem problems is how it portrays as kids. But it also sounds like you were just smart enough to also maybe be an asshole.
I think it was a great mix of all of those.
Could have been,
I
it could
was
have been both.
an asshole. I was depressed. None of it was properly channeled yet. It was like the perfect storm because some of the time I was just an asshole. Like,
and I think that's what's, you know, so nice, not nice, but so obvious when you watch Pam, you know, do her public speaking and do her comedy. For somebody who struggles to be in control of her body, you are in control of the situation. You are in control of the narrative. And that's what I'm picturing, like a younger you know, probably mentally running some circles around some of these teachers, you know, and just, right, making jokes about throwing the books into the other dimensions.
I broke some grown ass adults those years. Like, I broke people.
Yeah.
There was a man. This is such an awful story, but I'm going to tell it. And also, like, I think it's important to hear that, like, yes, the world was being not kind to me, but I was also not always kind to the world. There was a teacher who came just for a semester while the main teacher was on like sabbatical. And on the first day, I saw that he had a smiley face tattoo on his hand. And we asked him about that. And he said he believed in nonviolent communication and that he refused to yell. And I heard that as a challenge. And so did the rest of my class. But he just, because he so refused to yell, he almost spoke in like a condescending, sing-songy voice that you just don't speak it to teenage assholes. And so my goal became to get him to yell. And so things like he'd come in to teach and we'd all be on our desks standing there. Or we had taped things to, I mean, we just did so many things. And he ended up yelling and he quit. And I found out that he's never worked with young people again.
You know, and it's so true, Pam, because I think about this with parenting, with this new gentle parenting craze. I'm thinking about it with, you know, teenagers and you know, you work with kids and teens too. You got to be authentic and honest, or otherwise you guys sniff that out in 30 seconds to be like, this motherfucker, you're not going to yell. Like, what if you need to yell? And I point this out, like sometimes with your kids, you need to yell, not all the time, not in the normal day to day, but sometimes. And with teenagers, especially. And so I think it's funny. You even more than anything, you sniffed off him that's not authentic, that's not like real.
I remember thinking he's trying this thing on. He's trying on an identity because he got a new job. Like I remember distinctly, my mom was mortified because we had parent teacher conferences while he was a teacher. She had flown in from Ohio to a parent teacher conference and we sat down. I got to go to them together. And like in all the other ones, like, you know, the teachers gave mixed feedback and I took it because I respected them and I loved them. And, you know, I loved these teachers. And this one, we sat down and I started giving him feedback. And my mom was horrified, but I saw through it.
Pam, you've talked about some of the people who misunderstood, especially when you were younger. Do you have anybody that you can remember particularly helped you feel seen in those important years?
Well, my middle school guidance counselor before I went to boarding school was the only one that I think her office became my safe zone. I recently reconnected with her, but at boarding school, I had a bunch of them. You know, I had an English teacher who said, you can be as dirty and inappropriate as you want, as long as you're not hurtful to anybody else and it goes in your art. Before it was comedy, it was slam poetry. That was kind of my entryway. My slam poetry was absolutely comedy. I just didn't know that yet.
Right. I was going to say, where's one end and the other begin, I guess? You snap for one and you laugh with the other.
I
Yeah.
mean, and even in slam, you're cheering and screaming. It's like it's more of a it can
Right.
be so interactive. And I remember I wrote like a whole poem called "Shit" because I was like, I can be dirty in poetry. And I remember I the line of the poem was actually quite brilliant. I don't think I'm a poet, but a lot of times I had to like clean bathrooms to get rid of detention. So you had different kinds of detention you earned at this school called time. And so I remember I was cleaning a bathroom floor and I wrote the line of the poem, "The shitty clock ticks as I tick and clean up shit." And I was like looking back, that's a great line.
Man, I think our only one I had suspended in 8th grade for telling a teacher to fuck off. Like maybe I was only one more slip up away from you and me causing problems up in Burlington. It would have been no, yeah. I'd have been like, she's in charge. She's in charge here. I am her like underling. You know. I
Really,
think you ran the gang. You ran the detention gang. I'd imagine.
some of it. There were a few people who I think ran the show a little more than I did, at least my first few years. And like, you know, I looked up to and how much detention they had, which is probably not the right mindset. So that English teacher, I had a math teacher who I hated math. Like I was awful in math. I was a nightmare. I'd show up and ruin a class. Every day he would say like, "Do you have your math homework done?" And I would say no, and he would give me detention and I would complain and he would go, "Poor baby." But because I loved him, he like cheered me on as well because he was also teaching me how to write music and song recording. He got away with it. And
Yeah.
over time, I wanted to do my homework so that he would like see that I was trying. Gosh, I mean, so many staff at that school just
Yeah.
saw me and pushed me. And yeah, and I'm now on that school's board of trustees. So I'm still trying to like give back.
It's awesome. I think that's such a good example. Like even this guy, if you're good at connecting with people and especially teenagers, like I give my kids that I work with as therapists like shit all the fucking time. I wonder, Pam, how did the journey go after school to get, the advocacy arm of what you do is so cool and mixing public speaking, comedy, and advocacy? How did that end up flowing in that direction?
So I was a stand up for years. My brain processes in stand up. Like if I were to open a file on, I have a folder on my phone called funny shit and I'm constantly observing and like when shit happens I am writing about it and it turns into comedy. So stand up for years and then got a master's in advocacy and executive coaching and started kind of the educational that piece of it. And at one point I was asked to give like a TEDx type of talk. They wanted me to do it on disability and inclusion and they gave me a coach. And I wrote this very serious talk because that's what I was being encouraged to do, despite the fact that I was doing stand up and had these other pieces and about it's like a very serious talk. And a week before it, I had a meltdown. And I was like, this talk doesn't feel like me. This isn't authentic. And this was years ago. I mean, this went over 10 years ago, I think. And so I rewrote the whole talk. The only person that heard me rehearse was my sister's dog. He was great. He continued falling asleep, slightly rude, didn't give me the confidence I need, but the first few runs was really into it as long as I was giving him cookies. I flew out to Chicago to perform this, talk that was, I think, 15 minutes and half comedy, half storytelling, some message, some education. I had no idea if it was any good. And I watched the audience laugh and I watched them sob. And my mom had come out to see it. And she was like, "What is happening?" She just didn't know this was something I could do. I didn't know that was something I
Yeah.
could do.
Yeah.
Someone came up to me and said, "You're going to get booked." And I was like, "Okay." But just in case, I turned that 15 minutes into a half hour and then 45 minutes and then an hour. And
Yeah.
then, over time, I started with just maybe Jewish communities or high schools. And then people started being like, "Do you do corporate?" And so I went and got more degrees. And
Yeah. If you'll pay me, I do. I
yeah, it
sure
was
do. Yeah. Cut the check.
yeah. It was, well, my theory is it's okay to say yes if something feels a little risky, as long as I feel like I can nail it. Right. And so if I really am not confident I could nail it, I'm not going to say yes. But yeah, so it feels like a little bit like an accident that I did this. It truly was like, "Oh, you want me to do this? Okay. Well, like, let's see what this, I kind of died through it. And then over time, like somehow I was able to quit my job and do this full time.
I don't mean to sugarcoat this, Pam, but I just had a buddy on with dyslexia who really thinks that, as studies may show, that there's a correlation between creativity and dyslexia. Like, do you think that Tourette's has anything to do with how your mind works, or there's any connection you've ever thought about?
Yes. I think for sure. When I first started trying to just like not hate Tourette's, I was like, I had to find things that I loved about myself that had nothing to do with Tourette's. I'm funny, I'm creative, this, and this. And over time, I was like, shit, maybe I'm funny and creative and a hard worker in part because my brain is different. So yeah, I absolutely think it's connected. I think there are things that are harder for me. There are a lot of things that are harder than for me because my brain is different. But when I realize something is harder, it becomes my goal to find ways to make it work and get creative. But yeah, I absolutely think Tourette's helps me be funny and creative. Although I feel like I've said nothing funny on our time together today, but
Oh, in our business, Pamela, we call that a preemptive strike, where we tell the people, like, oh, this isn't that funny. But then we actually are like, this is going to be really funny. This is going to be funny. We're going to laugh.
you're like, how sad were you as a kid? And I'm like, let's see if I can make this funny.
But it's the idea, right? I want people to understand this, but also, my friends that I've had on, my best friend with ADHD, who's a chef, my best friend up here, and a lot of best friends apparently in Denver, she has bad OCD, but is also a psychiatrist. My friend with dyslexia who does advertising. Like, I'm not trying to necessarily tell sob stories, but have people understand, that this is something that if you're walking around in the world and somebody's twitching or somebody can't read the menu in front of you fast enough for dyslexia, like, you don't know what the fuck's going on over there. And that's the point here is it might be sad because, Pam, like, for people to reflect and understand others does sometimes require us to feel sad because sometimes things are sad.
I think sometimes if you only heard parts of my story, you would think it was a tragedy. I think my story is all of the genres mixed together, which I think is true for everyone, right? Like, but I think in the end, it's a comedy. I bark uncontrollably. That's amazing, right? Like, it might have sucked for a little bit as a kid, but once I leaned into it, God damn, it's funny.
Speaking of kids, your host, who also has a grandiose narcissism streak in him, would love to be doing some of the stuff Pamela's doing, speaking publicly, being on Netflix dating shows. How did that come to be?
The matchmaker and someone from Netflix had like seen me perform in LA years ago. And I remember the matchmaker ran up to me after the show and she was like, "Are you dating?" And I was like, "Ew, no, get away. Why are you, what's happening?"
Yeah.
And then we ended up kind of becoming friendly over the years. And so when she booked the show, she was like, are you dating? And first of all, dating, we could do a whole show. I do have a whole show on it that I'm debuting.
We were getting there. I was trying to spin this into the dating talk, of course.
Because disability and dating is a wild ride. And I have an entire new, wildly inappropriate show that is going to be at an off-Broadway theater in a few months for the first time about dating and sex with a disability. It took that journey. I started dating later in the game than everyone else. Not everyone else, but a lot of people. But yeah, so she was like, I was like, now I'm actively dating and less afraid of it. And so I ended up agreeing to do a little bit on that show, which was such a fun, weird life choice, which I'm at this point where like every year I do something and people are like, what? And that was that year. So there's a new one.
Any others?
All the time. This new one-woman show, if you hear the title, and I cannot tell you on this yet, the title and the tagline, people are going to be like, Pam! I'm excited about that.
Yeah, Pam has done some really good videos, guys, if you're ever on her YouTube. Just really good experiences, but also comedy. The most Jewish thing I'd seen in a while, Pam, was when you had your mom and you vibing back and forth about your history with Tourette's. And I was like, this is like, literally Fiddler on the Roof is happening in front of my face.
Which, by the way, I did Yenta in a high school production of Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah. Wait, you just said you weren't musical.
I mean, I could sell it.
Yeah. That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, where are you with dating now?
Oh, dying alone. Thank you for asking. Thank you so much.
I was only like 6 months ago. I was in the same spot, Pam. You got just keep scrapping. I promise. Keep scrapping.
I'm in this Facebook group of like people who I'm not supposed to, but like, we like fact check if someone says they're single, if they actually do, whatever. It's a great group. But recently someone posted something like, I don't want to get kicked out. It's my daily drama. It's my favorite thing. I love it. But someone posted like, girls, stick with it because I found love and you can too. And I almost chucked my computer out the window. I was like, thank you so much for coming on and being so condescending. I wish nothing but the worst for that woman. Anyway, I hate her.
I know I do, but anybody in my life knows what a journey dating was for me. And the point I make people is, dude, I've had to work at being a good partner and being good relationships. Like, it was not backwards. A lot of my therapy has been around being able to communicate as a male, share, being less narcissistic and understanding the experience of my partners. It was not, I mean, yes, I feel lucky and very fortunate, but like, I had to work, man. And I think that most people do to feel good in relationships, feel good about themselves. Like, it's not luck.
Everyone deserves a partner who's been to therapy. At this point, I really feel like it's such a green flag if a man I go on a date with mentions being in therapy. Like, yes. Being a little more honest, like I think for a long time, identifying as having a disability and being a part of that community made me feel like, or I felt having a disability made me kind of innately undesirable or took me out of the dating pool or unfuckable, right? Like, there are all of these fears that I had internalized.
Yeah.
So I didn't start dating until much later in life. And I also did a lot of work into like becoming a good partner. I have had some great relationships. And, I also tour 9 months out of the year, which makes it very hard to have something that kind of lasts. But I think in the last few years, I've decided I'm ready for more. I'm figuring out what that looks like. I am now dating with that in mind. I also am honest that I don't want children, although certain people really struggle when I say that, as though I'm saying I hate children. No, I love them. I would not. Kids thrive off of routine, and that's my least favorite thing. So I have the routines that I have and I like, but I am in a different city, every few days.
And I do think that's really important because how can you show up properly in a relationship, especially early in the dating world, where everyone's like, well, you don't show your true self. And I'm always like, what the fuck are these things we learned about dating, Pam? Like, why are we supposed to pretend like we aren't ourselves until some certain point when we like that has confused me because aren't we wasting time? And I think you are such an honest person where you've internalized like this is what you're getting. It's really probably not much different on date 25 as it would be on date one. And that's really what ideally we'd all be thriving for and comfortable enough to exist as.
Also, in real life, I'm like kind of aggressive and a boss. In dating, I'm
Yeah.
a little more quiet. I think it's because when I can like turn off, I want to just be in the moment and not performing. And yeah, that took me a while to figure out. But I also like keep dating comedians, which don't do.
Yeah. Usually, kind of like with therapists, there's a reason we end up as comedians. There's a reason we end up as therapists, mommy issues and whatnot. You got any, like, we like giving a gentle nod to men having things to work on this show, Pam? You got any stories for us?
I mean, so many.
I would imagine.
Men that I've dated. Like, okay, so early on, I dated this guy, and because I was newer at dating and he had dated a whole lot, I just thought he knew what he was talking about. And he did a lot of like giving me feedback on things.
Boy.
And I,
Was
now,
this pre the term mansplaining or was that?
that was it. It was absolutely, but it didn't feel like mansplaining. It felt like he would literally say, I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to teach you something about, and I just need that man to go to therapy.
So sexy. That's so sexy, man. God, I
He
can't.
went on 3 dates with a guy I really liked. And on date 3, he said, I'm married. You know that, right?
Yes.
I like to say I don't have daddy issues. I have daddy volumes. It like, and it took me years to like acknowledge it, realize it, and then date with that in mind.
Exactly. Again, being honest, naming those things and knowing that, yes, there are people out there who can communicate and can accept us for who we are. It takes a journey and it sounds like you're settling in, which is so great. Kind of going forward, like what would you want the rest of your career, not the rest, but like these next few years, like you said, I want to be 10 years older, but like, what are you hoping to accomplish in the foreseeable future?
I am so happy, which is so scary to say. It took years of therapy because it feels like if you say it, the world is going to get ripped out from under you. But the world does get ripped out from under me, and I figure it out. Like, I look at when COVID happened and every contract I had was canceled, and I, almost lost my career. And then I reminded myself that I've adapted my whole life to living in a world that wasn't made for me, and I can do that in this case. It just looks different. So I'm happy. I love what I get to do. I love that this is somehow my job. I love that I go from telling wildly inappropriate jokes on stage to going to a group of high school students and making them like love who they are, hopefully a little bit more. And then of course, like I'm having so much fun. I would love to get to the next level. So, I tour a lot. I would love to maybe tour a little bit less and make a little bit more. Love writing. It took me a long time to admit that I considered myself a writer, even though I don't know how to do a set. Like I have like comma splice disorder. I'm not punctuating anything correctly, but the stories are there. So I wrote a book. I'm hoping to get it published.
What are we talking fiction or are we talking autobiography?
It's a YA novel about the apology letters I was forced to write my first year of boarding school.
Good. All right. I would like an advanced copy if I can get myself on that list.
Yeah. So I think continuing to do the work to like have this life that I'm really proud of. And I've realized that when I have really specific goals, it always ends up looking a little bit different. So as long as I have the opportunity to be creative and funny and maybe impact the world a little bit, I think I'll be happy.
It's awesome. And it certainly seems like you got your eyes on the prize and I mean, it's know thyself, right? How you can make an impact in this world and what your strengths are, which is so great. It's a journey for people to find that. You mentioned having to kind of fit into a world that maybe wasn't built for you. Like, could you think of one thing, one piece of advice to give our audience that could help make the world a little more accepting or things that you wish people could have done that would have made it easier on you and anyone, all of us out here?
I can think of so much, but I think if we all go on a journey to love what makes us us, we are just kinder, better people. I look at like when someone is commenting awful, hateful things to me on the internet, that's not a happy person,
Mm-mm.
right? That's someone who's wanting to tear someone else down. So I'm a believer that like, go to therapy if you've got the means, right? Do what you can to be the best version of you. There are opportunities that aren't expensive that we can be exploring and working on. Take in art, take in different perspectives, different stories, because when we kind of feel that part of ourselves, again, I think we're better humans and kinder.
Absolutely right. And to get out of our own head and out into the world as we like. So do you have any media, TV, movies, things like that you recommend, not only as resources to understand Tourette syndrome, but just anything you really like?
Yeah, go watch movies. And so anytime that people with disabilities write a thing about disabilities and they're in the writer's room or on camera, it's going to be a more better. Look at me go with my
It's going to be more better for
better
sure, though. It will.
story. So like Crip Camp on go watch Crip Camp, especially if you're a summer camp person, because it's just like it's like a horny, great. It's just like disabled kids who go to camp and like get to do whatever they want. It's great. Crip
Okay.
Camp. Go watch Crip Camp. So good. The book Demystifying Disability by Emily Ledoux. I always say her last name wrong. I think that's correct. Might be Ledoux. Anyway, is like a encyclopedia of disability, because I like to say, right, like I know Tourette's, but I'm often teaching about kind of just feeling different, which is all encompassing, hopefully. But there's so many great resources. But that's a great book, a great movie. There are great TED Talks.
Unrelated favorite TV show out right now.
Favorite TV show out right now. I think Abbott Elementary is just so well written. So
It's
good.
on the list. It's like obviously I watched that regularly. I was also an elementary school teacher before I went back to school to become a doctor. Abbott rules. Abbott's in the top hierarchy. So yeah, it makes sense. We'd get along.
Yeah. Do you have a chance to watch Survivor? Because that's my kind of guilty pleasure.
So I'm new to Survivor. I made it through season 3. Our fellow member of the tribe, Ethan, and the Outback was my last season. Just picked it up. My girlfriend Jenna is a big fan. So I'm now current. We release these episodes on Wednesdays, guys. So Survivor's the second most important thing to come out on Wednesdays, Pam, our show being first. But yeah, now I'm back. I'm all the way in this season. There's a real KGB in this season. Have you watched the first episode of this season?
Sure. So I waited till I started.
Okay. There's like this big manly firefighter guy. He like cries. He makes friends with the girl with autism. I think he's already like married, kid stuff, but like, yes, he was like, if I don't know if there's enough audience of my show that also likes Survivor to just do a weekly Survivor update, but I have a feeling that might wiggle its way in, maybe every few episodes.
And I did say I was going to hit on him if he's married with kids, but I can be in love with him while I watch him never reach out,
How do you define the word love,
Yeah.
Pam?
I don't know that I have an answer, because I don't know that I can describe it. But I also, with like all of my camp friends, my comedy friends, every time we say goodbye, it's I love you, which is very much a summer camp thing, which is where we first learned it.
Boy, oh boy, is it. So we'll come full circle on that, everybody, that summer camp, if you have the resources and the means to send your kids there, is really a way that young people can learn who they are and flex those muscles. So Pam, that is how her and I became acquainted, mutual friends who went to summer camp together. And thank you so much for your time, Pam. You can find her website, PamelaComedy.com, her YouTube channel, her Instagram, all that stuff, and totally worth everyone's while. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right back to induct Tim Howard into the Bromotions Hall of Fame, where we celebrate men who've shown incredible strength, vulnerability, honesty, and set a good example for us in the world of Bromotions. Today, we're diving into Tim Howard's story, United States men's national team goalie, because as we said, he himself was diagnosed with Tourette's and OCD at a young age. He was born Timothy Matthew Howard, March 6, 1979, in North Brunswick, New Jersey. Father Raymond was a truck driver. His mother Esther worked various retail-type jobs over the years. Diagnosed with Tourette syndrome in his latency years, so that's elementary school years, and really used sports as a way to get some of that frustration out, as also we talked about him diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. And he's talked about stories of perseverance despite the challenges of these conditions. We'll see an interview with him here in a little bit where he expands on all that stuff. Tim's timeline for success. He had early success in the MLS with the Metro Stars. He then was moved over to Manchester United in the Premier League and had a long, successful career with Everton. This was back in the aughts, early 10s, when United States players did not succeed in the Premier League. There was no Christian Pulisic. There was nobody who was doing well over there. And so Tim was really our only player having success over across the pond. And then we all remember Tim for his success on the U.S. national team, including 2014 World Cup. He took the U.S. about as far as they've ever been. He came back after the Premier League to finish his career off with the Colorado Rapids here in my hometown of Denver, Colorado. Multiple-time MLS goalkeeper of the year, a legend for the U.S. men's national team, and he has been open and honest about living with Tourette syndrome, how he managed his condition while playing at the highest level of sports, and how anxiety and OCD were related to his Tourette's. He's worked with the Tourette's Association of America, he's done speaking engagements to raise awareness, been a role model for people. We're going to share a pretty long clip, about 5 minutes, in depth with Graham Bensinger, where Tim Howard comes on and talks all about life as a kid, life as an adult athlete, life as a parent with Tourette syndrome. We'll be back to talk about it on the backside.
You said before, if I woke up tomorrow without Tourette's, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Why not?
I don't know. It's who I am. I like who I am, and I've had success in my professional life. I've got the greatest friends that anybody can have. I've got 2 amazing children. I've got a great family. So I don't know. Life is good, and this is the only life I know. So. I don't know. I like who I am, and it's part of my personality.
Going back to when you were a child, your mother Esther told me it seemed like the symptoms, to her at least, developed over the course of like a day.
Yeah.
What do you recall from the first time you really felt like something was wrong?
Which happens a lot. You hear that from so many parents. You know that all of a sudden, boom. I mean, probably didn't happen overnight because the kid probably recognized it and tried to hide it. But eventually, it starts to get into motion, and it's like, wow, when did that happen? I don't know. I can't put an exact moment, but I remember some sort of head movement or eye movement or twitch, and it happened. I did it a lot, and it was weird and it was odd. I remember a lot of OCD, a lot of counting, a lot of touching, a lot of things like that. Again, which just felt probably not normal. They became normal pretty quickly, but it didn't feel normal at the time.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up because your mom gave me a few examples of that. She said you'd come in from outside having to go to the bathroom. The bathroom was on the far end of the apartment. Before you'd go to the bathroom, there'd be certain things every time in the room that you had to touch. Yeah. Or before you would talk to your mom, you had to tap her 3 times on the shoulder.
That was a funny one, yeah.
And she also said you just could not, for the life of you, bear to throw anything away. In all of those instances, like, what are you thinking about that, would make you act that way?
I don't know. I don't think I was thinking. It was just natural. That's what my mind was wanting to do. So there was some pretty funny moments in there.
Was it funny at the time though? I mean, did you realize?
Yeah, I realized. But my mom was great. Stuff like that. She just didn't. She did her research on it. She found out stuff, but she just let me be me. Which was great. So it wasn't like anyone called me on it. It was just some weird stuff that I was doing.
When are symptoms generally the worst?
Usually right before a game, so that's 24 hours before a match. They're very, very intense.
And what will happen?
Just get super tense, like my tics and twitches will become heightened more often. I can feel the tenseness in my muscles, and it's normal to me now.
Why not take medication for it? I know that's something you've avoided forever.
You know what? Ages and ages ago, when I was probably a young teenager, or just before, we spoke to my mom and I spoke to a doctor, I think, in New York, and unfortunately, quite a lot of medical professionals don't have it right yet. It's just a concoction of drugs for other ailments, and they kind of take that for a few months, see how it works, lower the dosage, lessen the dosage, change the medicine. And at the time, the doctor had said, well, it'll make you drowsy, it'll make you zombie-like. And I just said, even then, I said, I like who I am. I've got great friends, they don't make fun of me, and I don't need to change anything. And that was at a, again, I was a young teenager, but I didn't want to, or maybe I was in my mid-teens. I didn't want to not be who I was.
But it is interesting you mentioned that, because for a while you did apparently try to hide it from friends, family, later on the teammates and press. Why did you feel compelled to do that?
I think I wasn't very good at hiding it, I think a lot of kids do. Some kids can go two ways with TS, and I've seen it, and I don't think there's a right way. Even now when I speak to kids and they tell me their stories, some kids are just, super brave and bold, and they want to, look, this is what they've got a good family unit, and they want to tell their class, and this is who they are. And I think that's wonderful. If you feel that, like I did, it was something that I wanted to suppress and I wanted to hide, and maybe I wasn't brave enough at the time.
How did you try and hide it?
I don't know. I tried to be as still as I possibly could for as long as I possibly could, but again, I don't think it worked very well.
What made you decide to open up and tell people?
Again, I think there was a time when I was at the Metro Stars where I was a backup goalkeeper, and then I became the starting goalkeeper. And I don't know, I think I made a conscious decision that, look, I'm going to be a starting goalkeeper, and I'm going to be on television more, I'm going to be in the press more, and people are going to see it. And so I just, at that point, I just thought there's no reason to hide this anymore. It's not going to be of any use. People are going to see it anyway. Right. So, and that gave me a good platform to use that.
And as you see there, just a beautiful explanation by Tim, loving himself, having good support, all those things that you think would allow somebody with a neurodivergent condition to succeed in life. And it's a powerful reminder that the challenges don't have to define us. If you have good support, show your strength, resilience, and openness to really set an example and make him a true Bromotions Hall of Fame member. So thank you, Tim, for this prestigious and illustrious honor. All right, no break today. We'll dive right into the wrap-up. So In Depth with Graham Bensinger, thank you as we cite our sources. If you want to hear more from Pam, you can find her YouTube page. Her Instagram shows short clips as well. Really funny stuff on there, and you can check out or reach her at pamelacomedy.com. We thank her so much. What a really fun time that was. Our 3 takeaways for today as we look to be kinder and gentler bros out in the world. 1, Tim said it right off the top. Love yourself. Pros, cons, flaws, imperfections, all that stuff. If you have good support. Takeaway number 2, what you heard from Tim, his mom did her research. You heard this with Pam too. If you have a kid who has a neurodivergent condition, if you have friends who have any problems, neurodivergent, other mental health conditions, educate yourself. Be the best supportive parent, friend, brother, cousin, coworker, boss you can be. Okay? It's always worth your time. And also, if you heard that, my second thought also is about support. If you heard Tim in there talk about how his friends as kids were supportive when he was 12 to 15 years old. He said early to middle teenage years. Think about that. That is the prime time for bullying as a love language amongst boys. And Tim's friends were supportive. And I'm sure that had something to do with how he was able to succeed both on the soccer field and off the soccer field, become the superstar that he became. Imagine if it weren't like that and he were bullied relentlessly for his condition. And who knows what it would have done and how his trajectory would have changed. So our third takeaway today is that when you need a break, you take a break. People, we here at the Getting Fellas podcast need a couple weeks to reset the batteries and revamp the show. So we're taking them, need a little rest, but the mailbox remains open. Mailbox, DMs, text messages, calls to me. If you're looking for feedback, things you think we should talk about in new episodes, you want to be a guest or have guest ideas, we're wide open. Our ears are open. In the meantime, we'll wrap as we do with a reminder to be kinder and gentler out in the world. We'll see y'all in a couple weeks.